Hello and welcome to Rosie's Preserving School Pressure Canning. And today we're going to be making things with beetroot, fabulous beetroot. Now, if you look at the recipe sheet, there are instructions on there if you want to make just plain beetroot, such as I have here in this jar. So if for the soup recipe I'm going to be making, you needed to cook the beetroot first, and you needed to cook extra if you wanted to do these as well. If you want to do them on a different day or not, don't want to do the soup, then you can just do the beetroot. And that is basically your cooked beetroot cut into manageable pieces. You don't want them too big, otherwise they won't go in the jar efficiently. But I've sort of, I don't know if you can see there, the sizes, they're not too small, not too big, but if you always use them cubed or something like that, prepare them however you want to. Pack them into the jar, half a teaspoon of salt per jar, topped up with plain water, and then just processed for 30 minutes for 500 ml and 40 minutes for a larger jar. I'm not going to be doing that because I've got masses from last year. I don't need any more. I'm going to be making a borscht, a soup, beetroot soup, all ready for autumn and winter when it's a bit cooler. So I have all the ingredients here as per the recipe. The only thing that isn't on the recipe, I realise I think I must have lost it when I was writing, it must have dropped off the page, is just about 2 tablespoonfuls of oil in the pan first. I've got it on low at the moment. Once I've got some vegetables in there, I will heat it up. I also have the canner on. Now, if you're doing plain and soup, you could get on and do the plain, and they would, by the time they finish, because they're quite short, you'd have everything prepped ready to set the canner off again. But that might be just too much work in one day. I don't know. It's up to you. So in this soup, we've got the beetroot, onions, red cabbage, potatoes, carrots, and celery, and some tomatoes. And the only thing I'm putting in extra, just because I had it, is a courgette. I mean, that's just me. It's not on the recipe. I've put the tomatoes in a jug with some boiling water poured over so that it will help the skins to split and I can take the skins off. Normally, I don't skin tomatoes because normally I'm processing what I'm making in a food processor and they all get chopped up with everything else. You know, life's too short to be skinning tomatoes, in my opinion. But for this, they're going to be left not whole, but you know, chunky. And so I'm taking the skins off because they're not very pleasant if you find them floating around in your soup. And we're also, well, I'm leaving my borscht chunky because I prefer that, because it's more of a sort of big soup, more of a main meal soup for us then, rather than processing it all. But if you do want to process it before, well, to eat, I would suggest you leave it chunky, process it, and before you reheat it to serve, you process it then, because thick soups don't process that evenly, which is why there aren't many recipes for them. If you've got chunky bits, the heat kind of disperses more evenly. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. So into my pan, I'm basically going to start chopping everything into more or less the same size pieces. It doesn't have to be exact, because if you are going to process it before you eat it, it will all get squished up anyway, but I'm not, so I'm going to try and cut everything into sort of roughly a centimetre-ish, but I'm not going to be precious about it. So that's my courgette, which is the wild card. That's not on anything. And really, at this time of year, we're all trying to put courgettes into just about everything, just to make sure they're not wasted. So I have got 2 massive ones at home that missed picking in the week when it was wet, and they've grown too big, but I'll find another use for those. These are the potatoes. So cut them in thick 1 centimeter slices, and you can cut them the other way. And speed up the process. And that could go in, and everything needs to be sort of coated with the oil. So every now and again, give it a stir so they get incorporated. This potato, I've already started peeling these. I've got one left to do. Just put my finger on the knife, my thumb rather. Stick a bit of tissue on it and put my glove on. Good. I was going to put gloves on anyway when I do the beetroot, so that speeded that up. It's all live, folks. Right. It's the time of year when there's plenty of choice, plenty of ingredients. Even if you're not a gardener and you don't grow anything, there's plenty around. And if you look hard enough, it doesn't need to be super expensive. All right. Try and use the bigger carrots. At this time of year, there tends to be all sort of fresh garden carrots. I know they're all in gardens of a sort, but the kind of ones you get with the green still on, and they're quite fine and fiddly. So I managed to get some organic, kind of what I might call ordinary carrots, which for this are absolutely fine. Right, so the carrot. The celery, I'll show you this again, just in case you've missed it on other workshops. Hold the celery with the inside nearest you and just snap it. And then if there are any stringy bits, they will be exposed and you can just peel them off. This is quite good. Not too bad at all. But it saves having those sort of stringy ends. A couple of sticks of celery. I mean, the vegetables that are in this are a sort of guideline, really, in amount and style. But you can mix and match according to what you have, really. but a recipe has to stop somewhere. It can't just keep on adding in more and more things, really. So I want to get all of these sorts of bits cut before I tackle all the red things, because I'll put my other glove on for that. So and so my hands don't stain quite so much. And I've got a dark top on. I've long since learnt, don't wear anything pale when you're dealing with beetroot. They're so slippery, anything can happen. And usually does. So you usually end up wearing it at some point in the proceedings. Right, now you need to put all the vegetables in except the tomatoes and the red cabbage. So I'm going to get all those prepped first. Let's see, so they can be heating up. And then I'll do the red cabbage and the tomatoes at the end. Another stir, I think. It's okay to use a little bit of oil in these recipes, but you shouldn't process things in oil. It's not safe to do that. So let's chop these up. I think we're starting to get the new season onions. They're all a bit firmer and not quite so slippery as they have been. They've been appalling the last couple of months. So they've been stored and they're just too soft and squidgy to cut properly. Lovely when they're nice and crisp like this. My father used to like them baked in the oven. You sort of cut it into a segments that don't go all the way through. Put it into an oven-proof dish with a little bit of butter and some cheese in it. And as it cooks, it sort of opens like a flower. And he used to love just eating that for supper. Oh, I'll put that in. Another stir. Right, I'm going to put some garlic powder in. The garlic has been appalling, and I bought some in the week, which was really, really hard. And I thought, oh, good, you know, I'm okay. And I've just cut it open just now, and it's as rotten as can be inside. So, as this is, you know, it's only for me and mine, so I'm going to put some garlic powder in this time, but ideally fresh garlic's the thing, and about teaspoon level, small teaspoon of black pepper, ground black pepper. Give it another stir before we put the beetroot in. Put my glove on. Oops, wrong way around. Just to save my hands a bit. Stir the onions so they're mixed. Now these beetroot are already cooked, of course, and cooled down. So you can just rub off the skins, and when you go to cook them and they're raw, just cut or twist off the leaves at the top, leaving a little sort of stalk, and leave the roots on, give them a wash, and then when you come to prep them, you can just rub off all the skins and the bits of stalk that are left and the roots, and you don't lose too much of the beetroot juice leaking out doing it that way. So you can just cut these like I did the onions, cut them into cubes. Don't need to be too small, and whichever way it's going to end up, that's fine. Six on the recipe. I don't know how many I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 2 extra, but I might take those home and have them with some salad. I love beetroot. I'll see. Okay. Rosie. It's going to be so lovely in the autumn. And as it says on the recipe sheet, I mean, traditionally, you can just eat it with creme fraiche or plain yogurt sort of dolloped on the top, or traditionally it would be served with strips of cooked steak on the top of it with the creme fraiche, and there's some really good bread as well, nice rustic bread, and that's the way I shall serve it as a main meal. I mean, if you wanted to, I suppose you could process it with small dice of steak in it, but I should do that bit when it comes to it while the soup's heating up. Right, I'm going to put these other 2 in, otherwise there's a chance they may not get used today. You can still see the separate vegetables at the moment, but I think once it's processed, it's going to be just uniformly beetroot red, which is glorious. And of course, it makes a great fabric dye. You know, it's got such fabric staining properties. You can make use of them, and if that floats your boat, beautiful color. And if you've got the more orangey ones, you know, you can get all sorts of colors of beetroot now. Just do the same thing as I'm doing. It doesn't make any difference. Right, that's all of that. So now we put in the hot stock. Get rid of my beetroot pan. I've got some stock here. I've got about 2 litres here. Just going to go in. This is my Vegemite stock that I always use. If you're just using plain water, you'll need to add a little bit of salt, or if you're using a commercial stock cube or something, you probably won't need to salt it. I should leave the salt out and then taste it before you serve it once you're going to use it, and add it then if it needs it. Once it's processed in and it's salty, it's unpleasant. So there we are with it stirred up. Now we do the tomatoes and the red cabbage. And tomatoes have been sitting there patiently. I'm going to lift them out onto the board so I can take the skins off, hopefully. And then the water that they were soaking I'm going to put in as well, because I haven't got 3 litres, so that's fine. You can see the skins split very helpfully when they're put into the hot water, and they come away quite easily. So if you've got a lot to do, that's what you need to do so you don't waste any tomato flesh. And then you can just use your knife to sort of help it off like that. And then chop. What I generally do is go round the center stem and then just take out the top bit where it was joined to the plant, which can be a bit tough. And then if it hasn't split on its own, just stab it with a knife and it will peel back almost immediately. Yeah, that's all come away in one go. If you've got a lot of tomatoes to peel, if you're going to process them in a jar to have as tomatoes in the winter, then if you can, dehydrate and powder the skins. So they are very, very good as a gluten-free thickener for soups and stews and things like that, gravy especially. And it means if you've got someone who is, you know, gluten intolerant, they can eat the same meals as you do, you know, without having anything thickened by flour, which is brilliant. Very, very good for you as well. Oops, that juice is all going to run off onto the table, so I'm just going to pour it straight in there if I can. And then take this last one off. Right, there's a lot of seeds on there, so I'm going to put that into my compost bin. I don't want too many seeds in there. Right, now on to the cabbage. Waiting patiently. Take the end off. And take the outer leaves off as well. You don't want a huge red cabbage, you know, just a small one is good, unless you've got another use for it at the time. It does keep quite a long time in the fridge, but even so, it's better to use things fresh if you can. Right, so we can get this, and then take it off from the sort of cheeks off of the side. That without too much of the bottom stem, and then I'll take that off of there, and I can slice it so that it's quite across the grain. You know, you don't want too many big pieces of the veins of the leaves or the leaves themselves. Just chop it up. And if you keep the sort of slices fairly small, it just saves on a lot more chopping, as it will separate in the pan. So like with this one, I'll cut it across a couple of times before I cut it the other way. Probably try and sort of cut it on a bit of a slant. These vegetables don't have to cook, so they're all cooked. They just need to be hot, heated through, and that's it. They'll get cooked in the processing. So put that big leaf in there. So once we've got this in and it's all heated up, we can get filling the jars. Bit I'm going to take out. Do this last piece. And that can go in as well. Quite the pan full today. That's good. It's always good to get a whole lot done in one go. I'm just going to give it a stir. There's lonely bits of green courgette amongst a sea of red. Right, I'm just going to get this lot cleaned up a bit, and then we'll get filling the jars. Turn it up a little bit, a bit more heat in this top bit. Rid of all the puddles of juice everywhere. So I've got my little dish of vinegar there to do the seals with. And I've got 1 litre jars, because this is going to be a big soup as a meal replacement for us, not just as a kind of starter. So I'm going to do a litre size so that there's enough for a good bowl each. Yep. So we're going to fill the jars as normal, up to the fill line, 3 centimetres. below the top or 1 inch, and use the stock as evenly as you can. I mean, you can always top up with hot water if there's not enough liquid. Yeah, right. So I'm going to turn that off and lift it down onto my heat mat so I'm not working at height, as it were. I'll keep my spoon in there for a moment so I can sort of give it an occasional stir to make sure that I get a mix of veg. Got my wide neck funnel. So dip down to get some of the ones from the bottom if you don't think they're sort of stirred enough. And they will still feel quite hard and raw, which is fine, but they're hot. So I need to get them up to that there and put some more stock in. Don't all have to be under the stock. I don't want to sort of run out and not have any left for the end jar at all. You know, you want to sort of measure it out as evenly as you can, or distribute it as evenly as you can at this stage. Then we can go back and fill up, top up and seal. You need to debubble like mad this time. Because of all these odd edges. And to be a glorious colour though. Smells quite oniony at the moment, but there's it will even out in the processing. Four jars done. I'm going to try and do 7 if I can. So I've got 1 layer in the canner, but I won't be able to stack these jars. Oh. Oops. Right. To remove my spoon. As you can see in the pan, I've got mostly juice and some vegetables as well, but the jars aren't topped up yet, so I'm going to go around and put some liquid in, or more liquid in, and then we'll debubble, and then we'll top up with more veg if it needs it. Because when you debubble and you're taking out air pockets, you kind of create more space as a rule. You can often force a little bit more in the jar. Right, that one's done. That one needs some more. That's much. That's all right. It's all right. That was all right. Just this one. See what I can add. If I can't use it all, I should just make it on into soup from fresh, and we'll eat it like that. I don't want to put the counter on again, really, for what is essentially one jar full. So that's what I will do. Right, so I've got my debubbler. Put that in there a moment. And I will give everything a good poke around at the bottom there. The stuff that's in the liquid. And you can see already, compared to the others, that one has gone down considerably. So we'll still get some more in. It's a bit time consuming, but worth doing, because it means the jars won't siphon, and they won't burst the seal. We can get a little bit more in. It'd be all right if I hadn't put those extra 2 beetroot in, you see. This shows you it's worth debubbling every time. I know I sometimes forget when it's raw packed meat and things like that, which in a sense don't cause a problem, but it's best to get in the habit of always doing it, and then you don't forget. If you haven't got a piece of useful plastic like this called a debubbler, then use a dinner knife or chopsticks, something like that, anything smooth and long that will go in and out without sort of causing any more friction. Right, it's this one. Right, so now I'm going to go around again and just try and fill up the top, or to the top, so that everything is really efficient. And I'm just using the funnel to sort of push it down onto what I've already debubbled. Or you can use the back of your ladle like that. There'll be enough left to make into soup. Oops. That one's completely finished. You see, sometimes we just put things in the jar, do it up, that's it. But sometimes like this, you have to take a bit of time and be careful. Right, see if I can get some more liquid out of this. There's literally a couple of ladlefuls left now from what there was. More liquid in the top. I'm not going to top it up with water because there's plenty of liquid in the jar, and more will come out of the vegetables as they're processed, so it's going to be fine. We could do a few more bits of veg. Probably there's only about a teaspoonful left. I can surely force that in. There we are. So it was worth doing. I'll get that out of the way. All right, so it's just seals and sealing now. So we've got our vinegar, our seals, we need our cloth, and the jar tops are in quite a mess because I've been going round in and out with them, so I want to wipe them carefully, make sure there's no residue to come off. Turn it over each time. Fresh piece of cloth surface. Make sure you don't transfer beetroot from one to the other and contaminate the lid that you've cleaned. I'm going to seal as I go, so I know where we are, what's been done, what hasn't. There's the whole jar going in. Inside. It's also doubly important because this mix had a little bit of oil in it, and that will, the vinegar will cut through that and clean it off. Because the kind of juice that we're canning them in will still have that oil in it, so it would make the seal fail if you didn't clean it off. See you see the vinegar stain on there. The jar didn't look particularly stained, but they've all been like that, by the way. So shows how important it is to do that. Get that off. Right. Maybe a tight squeeze, but you'll get 7 in. The one in the middle. Like one in the middle. And last one. Now, because this is such a tight squeeze, I'm actually going to put the vinegar in next before I put the last jar, so it's got some chance of getting into the water and not just staying on the top of the jars. And that just helps to stop the lime in the water. You're getting lime scale on the outside of your jars and spoiling the look of what's in them, because it will stain them white and it's almost impossible to remove. So I always put the vinegar into the canner before I close it. It's about 2 tablespoonfuls, but I use what's left out of my little dish. So we need to be putting the lid on, waiting patiently here. And then close it. And then wait for it to vent. And we'll turn it up. Pick up some pieces I've spilled on the floor. Good. So while we're waiting for that to vent, I just sort of talk to you a little bit about beetroot, which I think us Brits kind of just use as an also-ran. You know, we have some beetroot if we kind of want something with a salad, or, you know, we don't sort of think of them with any kind of importance particularly, or I didn't used to. But most vegetables can be assessed really by the colours that they produce and so on. And beetroot is particularly strong, and I think we need to incorporate it more into our sort of everyday diets. Now, the jar I showed you at the beginning that I did last year has got the pieces of beetroot in there, just in plain water. So I've got various ways I can go with that. Beetroot are very, very good for you. They're good for heart health. They've got antioxidants, so they're great, you know, with sort of cancer type prevention. None of them can be claimed to kind of, you know, make a huge dramatic effect, but it all helps if you eat a mixed diet. They have vitamin A, they have magnesium, potassium. Very, very good for us, and they're great for if you exercise a lot, if you drink beetroot juice as part of a smoothie or just on its own. It will help you to exercise for longer and to recover quicker. You can put other things into it like ginger, or, you know, other spices you like, cinnamon, that kind of thing. They're easy to juice, or you can buy a good quality beetroot juice already done. You can also, if you have a dehydrator, you can dehydrate the slices. and then powder it. And powdered, they can be added to almost anything, you know, into soups, gravies, casseroles, that kind of thing, but also cakes, smoothies again, all kinds of things. Plain in the jars like this, you can open them and eat them as they are. And I like to mix in some very finely chopped red onion, maybe some finely chopped or sliced red cabbage, and mix it with mayonnaise to make a lovely red coleslaw. In our other classes, we smoked some salmon the other evening, and we had that mixed in as a main salad with the fish, which was very good. But I used then a jar of beetroot that we'd pickled with red onions, mustard seeds and so on, and mix the mayonnaise into that. So get used to thinking, oh, I could put that with that and that, you know, not just turn to the same old, same old. You can empty them out and drain them, put them into a roasting dish. You could have a butternut squash, just cut it up as is with this peel on it. You know how hard it is to get that off when they're raw. So leave it on, cut it into chunks, take out the seeds, and put them in a roasting dish, and pour some oil and herbs over, maybe some garlic, and roast it in the oven as a main vegetable, either with a roast dinner or on its own with cheese on the top, or, you know, with a jacket potato or something. All sorts of varieties. And you can roast pumpkin in the same way. Leave the skin on, give it a good scrub, and leave the skin on. It goes really, really tender, and then you can eat that whole lot. And sweet potato as well, scrub those, chop it up into chunks, or mix all of them together in a big dish, and, you know, have it as a main vegetable dish with something else if you want to. And as I said, you can powder it. You can use it as a food coloring if you're making sort of icing or something for a cake. You can mix in a little bit for a very lovely pink shade of icing. You won't really taste it as being beetrooty. It will just be pink. You know, so, but as I said, be careful what you do, you know, getting it on your clothes and so on, because it will stain fabrics very effectively and pleasingly if that's what you're after. But lots and lots of ways of using it and storing it. And also, if you're growing them, you can just store the actual beet part without the leaves on in sand, and they will store all winter without any other treatment whatsoever. So you can just go out and get some whenever you want to. If you put them in a greenhouse or a dry shed or something, you can go and fetch them and cook them from scratch. And I think they're nice sort of roasted whole in that respect. A bit like my father had the onion, you know, but do it with a beetroot and then pop some cheese in or something like that and roast it. So lots of ideas there for your beetroot. And if somebody offers you some bunches of them, then grab them and say, oh yes, thank you, I can make some lovely things with that. And you can, you know, you could even put these into some sort of flan and glaze it, that kind of thing. How's our venting going? I don't think we're up there yet. Not far off, I don't think. What I'm going to do today is get it up to pressure and put the weight on, and then it's going to cook for 90 minutes. So I'm not going to ask you to hang around and wait for the 90 minutes. I think we've done enough now that you know how to open the canner and take out the jars at the end. So next time we'll be doing everything potatoes. So the recipe sheets are up. Oh no, it's not potatoes, sorry, it's mushrooms. I thought it was potatoes. I was all geared up for potatoes. Potatoes is the workshop after. So yes, all things mushrooms. So if you see some bargain mushrooms, or you can, you know, it's not the sort of thing people usually grow and offer you. So you'll need to hunt around a bit on the markets and see if you can grab you know, get a lot. You know, you'll be pleased that you did. Don't just sort of do enough for one jar. it will be worthwhile having them on the shelf, and they pressure can beautifully. So where are we with our venting? It's all starting to hiss very pleasingly, but it's got a lot of jars, big jars there to sort of heat up, as well as the canner, of course. Once you've got them all prepped like this, though, you know, it's easier to use. I think there's nothing more fiddly than, you know, thinking, oh, I'd love some beetroot, and you better buy sort of 2 or 3, and then all the faff of cooking them and, you know, peeling them and everything. It's much better to just get on and do a big batch, and then you've got them on the shelf, as I have, all along the back there and in the cupboards and just about everywhere else, and you can mix all sorts of things together that we've already done. You know, put some beetroot in with some of the beans that we've done. You could make, it's a bit of a shame, I suppose, to make something like chili, because they've got such a delicate flavour of their own, but there's lots of things that you could. In the winter, I do slow cooker with beetroot and red cabbage and apple and some red wine vinegar, some juniper berries, that kind of thing, bay leaves, and cook it in the slow cooker, and then I process it to keep it, and we have that as a winter vegetable as well. I think I'm seeing the odd whiff of steam. It's certainly gurgling a lot, so it's not far off. Just going to wipe the underneath of this weight, it's leaving sort of soot everywhere. I think this winter I'm going to experiment much more. We're doing, I don't know how to describe it really, winter veg cottage pies, you know, not making them with mince, but just a mixture of different veg and beans and that kind of thing, and topping it with mashed potato and baking it. I'm going to come back to this when we're venting, because it's not there yet, and then we'll put the weight on and start timing. Okay, so we've vented for 10 minutes. I don't know if you can quite see all the steam coming out there, but the canner is now locked. The lock has come up, and I'm going to put the weight on. Now I've got a cloth to protect my hand, as you always get steam touching your hand, and sometimes quite painful. I'm going to put that on to close the canner completely, and then we wait for the pressure gauge to come up to 10 pounds psi. I'm going to leave the heat up while that happens, and you'll see it climbing eventually. It takes a while to sort of get going. Sometimes I find the canner lock just sort of keeps jiggling about, and it doesn't sort of pop up like it should. But I've also, if I use a tea towel and just wipe around it, sometimes it gets a kind of surface tension of water, and it can't actually overcome that to release. So it's generally what I do. I'm going to get my timer ready to start it. You can't start it till the pressure's up to 10 pounds psi. But the timing for 500 ml jars, the 1 pint jars, is 75 minutes, and the timing for the bigger jars, 750 ml or 1,000, is 90 minutes, which is what I'll be setting the timer for, because mine are litre jars. And that would be 90 minutes. You can see the needle on the gauge is just lifted off of the baseline and is starting to climb. Once it's up to pressure, I generally reduce the heat. It's on 6 at the moment, and I reduce it down to 3. Now, I know that doesn't mean anything according to your hobs and whether you've got gas or electric or induction or whatever, but you will know your hob, and you just need to keep it constant by adjusting the temperature up or down. The weight does most of it. If it starts to get too hot, it will start to jiggle, which is what's called a jiggler weight, and it rocks and gradually releases a bit of steam, and that gives you time to get the temperature regulated. It's not a good idea to have a steam escaping all of the time, because eventually you run out of water in the canner, and that's not good. But it's not quite so critical if you use the jiggler weight. It does help to sort of babysit it, which means you don't have to stand beside it or sit beside it for the whole of the processing time. It's getting up there. Must clean this canner lid off. It's got a sort of sooty deposit all around the base of that vent there, which I must get some wire wool to or something. Probably is this time of the year, especially, you're always using the canner, you know, it's never time to sort of service it properly. But it's well worth. I noticed before we put it on today that Trevor, who's here with me, oiled the seal, which is always a good idea. If the seal dries out too much, it will possibly not seal the canner effectively. So it's as well to sort of check it's in place properly in the lid, and then just put a little bit of oil on the end of your finger and just rub it round. You don't need masses, just a little sort of smear all the way around, and just check everything else is fine and done up tightly and everything. Because if steam escapes from around the gauge, if that comes loose, that can mean that you just never get up to pressure properly. You know, you're kind of cooking away and nothing happens. So don't do it with your fingers. Use a pair of pliers or a spanner or something that fits it. We're nearly halfway there, which is good. Up to 5. So write some labels for the things I did recently that I haven't labelled up yet. It's always easy to put them to one side and then you don't know when you made them, which year it was. You think you'll remember, but you never do. So this is when you're waiting for things like this to happen, the pressure to get up is, you can just do 1 or 2 little housekeeping jobs. Pasta sauce we made last time. I tend to put the labels on the seals because with the Lepape jars you can't reuse the seals, so it means you don't get labels stuck all over the jars that you can't get off either, which look messy. Look, almost at 10. We are. So I'm going to start my timer. I've got it for 90 and leave it to process. Today, I'm not going to come back to it at the end because it's quite a long time for you to sort of wait around 90 minutes. So as by now, most of you know, once the time's up, turn off the canner, allow it to depressurize. The gauge must be back at naught, and then take the lid off very, very carefully, facing away from you so you don't get a face full of steam. And then just let everything calm down for a bit, and then lift out the jars onto a nice thick heat mat or cloth. I've got an old towel that I use. I spread out, and then leave them overnight before you take the lids or rings, whichever you've got, off, and test the seals are fine. And then you can label them up and put them on the shelf, and another job done. So I'll see you next time for mushrooms. Good job we looked. And have a happy 2 weeks. See you then.